The era of Prohibition is one that has captured imaginations for decades. The time that saw organised crime take a foothold in American society. A foothold that has still not been fully given up to this very day. 1920s Chicago holds an air of legend and mythos that is comparable to the tales of the Wild West. Both eras saw heroes and villains, cops and criminals, and the idea of who was the hero or the villain depended on your point of view. The Mafia movie is a well-established genre, with some of the greatest films and television shows of all time being dedicated to those larger-than-life characters who made up the seedy underworld of organised crime. However, while there are some video games dedicated to the life of crime, there isn't too much choice when it comes to strategy games plotting out the rise of a criminal empire. So, is Paradox's latest title an offer we can't refuse, or will it sleep with the fishes? I'm Strategy Tom, and I promise I'll try to keep the cliches to a minimum in this, the review of Empire of Sin. Given that this is a game review and not a history essay, I'll try to give you just the basics here. In January of 1920, the Volstead Act came into effect in the United States. The Volstead Act put very strict regulations on the brewing and distribution of alcohol, essentially banning booze in the USA. Despite some initial misgivings, the act proved very popular, and across the country, Americans relished their new, sober lifestyles in which crime and violence were almost completely eradicated. Wait, no. It was the other thing that happened. People did not give up drinking at all, and the distribution and sale of alcohol, once under the purview of legitimate businesses, now fell under the control of criminal gangs. Gangs that were happy to bribe, threaten and murder their way into gaining control over the newly illegal alcohol market. Empire of Sin is about those gangs. You are presented with a cast of characters with various traits, skills and personalities. You choose one and you make your way onto the streets of Chicago to become the biggest, baddest gangster that there ever was. And story-wise, that's about it, I'm afraid. Now, you are given missions to guide you on your way to being the boss, and some of the missions are unique to each character and their backgrounds and ambitions. But ultimately, that's not really enough to keep each playthrough from feeling a bit samey. I'm about to touch on this a bit more in the next section, but if you saw that Paradox logo and you were expecting a game with as much depth and intrigue as something like Crusader Kings, then, like me, you're going to be disappointed with your time with Empire of Sin. I'll be honest, the combat in this game is not what I expected going into it. In order to gain control of more properties, you can either buy empty buildings, or, and this is the more fun way, storm a building and take it by force. Once inside, your boss and his crew spread out and find cover. After this, you begin a turn-based fight, in which most characters have 2 action points with which to either move or fire on an enemy. Empire of Sin is very much XCOM with mobsters. The chances of you hitting an enemy is dependent on the weapon your characters are using, the range, the amount of cover the target is in, and your character's level of accuracy. Keep fighting until all the enemy goons are toast, and hey presto, the building is yours. Personally, I like the combat system in Empire of Sin. There is a real tactical thought process that goes into utilising cover and ensuring that your crew has a variety of weapon types for all situations. I like the level of thought that needs to go into the bigger, more difficult fights. And if you don't think it through, then the permadeath mechanic means that the gangster that you just spent all that time cultivating and rising through the ranks, well, they're gone for good. It creates a sense of investment and ownership that I really enjoy in my strategy games. The problem with combat, however, is how goddamn repetitive it all is. It does feel like at times that I was just going from building to building, having the same style of fight over and over again. What was worse is when you engage in what is meant to be a large-scale gang war against another faction. You might think that hitting strategic locations and weakening your foe might be the thing to do to ultimately defeat them, but it really isn't. You see, when a boss is killed, you automatically take over all of their territory in one go. There is also a mechanic that allows you to drive to a location, which is essentially fast travelling around the map. So, the thing to do is to drive to the enemy's headquarters, burst in there, fight your way to the boss, and pump him or her full of lead. Bada bing, bada boom, war's over as quickly as it started. You have just gained vast swathes of territory. There should be more to it than that, but unfortunately, there isn't. The management aspects of the gameplay did not impress me much either. I had hoped, as I said earlier, that the Paradox connection would mean that the management of our kingdom of brothels and speakeasies might have a Crusader Kings feel to it, with the intricate management of our underlings, placating and bribing the right people, while engaging in nefarious plotting to discover the treachery and double dealing of my underlings before ensuring that they are met with an unfortunate accident. I was hoping that tense alliances between rival gangs could be nurtured in order to stand up to a bigger rival, only to turn on one another once the bigger fish had been removed. But no, there's none of that. In its place, there is a management system so basic that it makes Rome 2's Total War's faction management look like it was designed by Machiavelli himself. There is a very, very basic upgrade system to manage your properties, and the diplomacy mechanics feel totally superfluous, with little advantage or disadvantage to truly be had from engaging in it. Empire of Sin is a fun game to play that suffers from a dreadful sense of repetitiveness. I feel like when more updates and DLC are released, then this is a game that could be great, but I don't think it's there yet. And that bothers me. It bothers me that it is becoming accepted practice to release a game devoid of content only for it to be added in later, sometimes at cost to the player. That is not the way it used to be, and it's not the way it should be. Empire of Sin was merely published by Paradox, not developed by them, but with Paradox's latest title, Crusader Kings 3, being such a brilliant game at launch without DLC, I dared to dream that Empire of Sin might follow suit. I'm not saying that Empire of Sin is a bad game, far from it. It's actually pretty enjoyable in places. It's just clear to see that there is so much missed potential that we as gamers might be forced to pay extra to see realised. The presentation of Empire of Sin is, in my mind, one of its highlights. There are some criticisms, naturally. The animations are a bit clunky in places, and the design of the interiors are repetitive. But honestly, why wouldn't they be? One speakeasy looks like another, a brewery is a brewery. So, those issues aside, there is a lot to love here. I really enjoy the music, the voice acting, and the sound design in general, which all lends itself to the era in which it's set. Graphically, the game looks pretty good, and I didn't encounter too many glitches or bugs in the hours that I've already put into this game. The odd one or two, but believe me, I've seen much buggier launches. One of my favourite parts of the whole game is the sit-downs, where you go to meet with another gang leader. During these sit-downs, you hash out deals and attempt to solve issues diplomatically. Like I said in the last section, in terms of how much they actually affect your playthrough, the sit-downs are a bit simplistic. But what I do love is how well crafted they are, with every character having multiple lines of recorded dialogue to choose from in your meetings. It's little things like that that get me invested in a game. There's not too much to say about Empire of Sin's presentation. What's there is done well, but as with everything in this game, it has as much depth as a puddle. I was really hyped for this game, and perhaps my level of anticipation has heightened my sense of disappointment. If you want an XCOM style tactical shooter, that Empire of Sin will provide some entertainment for you. If, like me, you were hoping for a deep and multifaceted simulation of the golden age of organised crime, you will be disappointed. So, let's take a look. The premise. Pros. The Prohibition-era gangster themes are, admittedly, very cool. The cons. The attempt at story elements through the missions is weak and poorly realised. The gameplay. Pros. The tactical shooter elements are pretty entertaining, at first. The cons. The combat quickly becomes repetitive to the point that it's grating. And the Empire management has a serious lack of depth. Presentation. The pros. The sit-down sections are well crafted with a large variety of voice-acted options. The cons. Like with the gameplay, a lot of the designs are repetitive and do become boring. There is one word that keeps getting used when talking about this game: potential. I can see the potential to be an amazing game in there, but it is certainly not amazing now. I'm hard pushed to even call it average. It's not in its current state, it's below average. I was so looking forward to this game, and maybe I'll come back to it at a later date, and it will have developed into the game that everyone can see that it has the potential to be. But right now, I can only give Empire of Sin a 4 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching. What did you think of Empire of Sin? Am I being too harsh? Perhaps I'm being too generous? Tell me what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I'm Strategy Tom, and I'll see you next time.